Coming up next, back by popular demand. We've already done 5. Now we're going to do 5 more per your requests. It's another countdown of the most controversial songs from the rock era, the most taboo songs ever. Last time we covered tracks by Heart and the Stones and the Beastie Boys. But this time we got 5 more fiery offerings that rustled up cancel culture, provoked radio censors, and got blacklisted from the airwaves. Now, for one of these, a DJ literally lifted the needle off the record mid-song. He was playing it the first time. He thought the lyrics were so obscene, and it was banned from there on out. Another's accused of being xenophobic. It was actually the opposite. And then there's a song that has to be the most disbarring single of the 70s. It was so bad that drivers were freaking out and pulling off to the side of the road while listening to it, and the FCC banned it, outlawed it. That's just the beginning. We got 5 controversial songs today. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember the first time that you ever saw cable TV, when you were used to only 3 or 4 channels, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the white button. Promise that you'll find something to dig on this channel. And also check out our Patreon. And remember to go to professorofrock.com to vote for the greatest band of all time. We got the bracket there. Just sign up. So today I've got another countdown for you, but I'm really excited about this one because it's part 2. Not long ago, we featured 5 of the most taboo, most controversial tracks from the rock era. And the stories behind them were pretty crazy. But you knew there had to be more, many more. So today we're diving even deeper down the rabbit hole, and we're keeping the controversy coming with 5 more taboo tracks. All right, coming in at number 5, this one's very surprising, this controversial. It's from his 1983 album, Let's Dance. I got David Bowie's version of China Girl. Yeah, there was another version before his. Although Bowie's rendition of China Girl is the most well-known, the track was actually co-written by Iggy Pop and David Bowie back in '76. The song first appeared on Iggy's debut solo LP, The Idiot, the following year. Now, Bowie composed the music and Pop improvised the lyrics, which were reportedly about an affair that Iggy had with a Vietnamese woman. The track was released as a single in May of 1977. However, Iggy's China Girl did not chart. David Bowie re-recorded his more famous version of China Girl during the sessions for Let's Dance, reportedly to help Iggy Pop, who was in dire financial straits at that moment. Co-produced by the great Nile Rodgers, Bowie's China Girl was reworked into a mainstream hit. Now, the song reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. It also went to number 3 on the US rock charts. And it went to number 2 in the UK. Huge song, everybody remembers it, at least if you grew up in the 80s. Helping it to rise up the ranks was an Asian-inspired hook and a music video featuring an interracial romance between David Bowie and New Zealand actress Geeling Ng, whom he later dated. Now, while filming the video in the Chinatown district of Sydney, Australia, Bowie became enamored with the community, and he described the video as a vignette of his continuing fascination with all things Asian. Direct quote. However, in recent years, the cancel culture crusaders have set their sights on this song to get rid of it. Actually, it happened in 2020 when the BBC rebroadcast Bowie's 2000 Glastonbury performance as part of its tribute to the festival. And of course, this set included China Girl, because it's one of Bowie's biggest hits. And the Twitter trolls came out of the woodwork calling the song racist. People were offended, I guess, by its Asian keyboard riff, and there were also accusations of cultural appropriation and the perpetuation of Asian stereotypes. For example, some detractors read the phrase "My Little China Girl" as a trope of Asian women as submissive and subservient. But is there anything to this? Is there anybody out there that believes that David Bowie was racist? I'm not one of them. I think the only way you could make that argument is just out of pure ignorance. David Bowie was a longtime advocate of racial equality. I mean, remember when he pushed back on MTV big time in an interview? for black artists to be represented on MTV in the early 80s when they wouldn't play Michael Jackson and Prince's videos.
I'm just floored by the fact that there's so few black artists featured on it. Why is that?
That live interview with MTV's Mark Goodman in 1983, Bowie directly addressed this issue, and he pushed for MTV to change its policies and let the music speak for itself.
A string of other black faces.
That's
and black
very
music.
interesting. Isn't that interesting?
But really, all you have to do is make an examination of the song's composition in context and listen to Bowie's explanation of the song. For example, he called China Girl a very simple, very direct statement against racism. And he described this message in his video as a commentary on Western exploitation of Asian cultures and on power dynamics in interracial relationships. That's what Bowie said.
When I look at my China girl.
So there really isn't anything to accuse China Girl or Bowie of other than it's a great song. China Girl is a satire and commentary on racism, not a proponent of it. Bowie is using art to promote positive change in the world, and censors, they just don't have a leg to stand on with this one.
My little China girl.
Coming in at number 4, it's a hit song from the band who taught the world how to relax. Frankie Goes to Hollywood with Although some Americans might not remember some of this stuff with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, they were one of the most controversial bands of the 80s, especially on their home turf in the UK, where they actually had the number 1 and number 2 song in the charts at the same time. Only the Beatles and John Lennon had ever done that. It set off a media firestorm due to the song's sexually suggestive lyrics and its stage show. It had some themes in there of a word that I can't say here on this platform or the video get banned. Relax was written by singer Holly Johnson, guitarist Brian Nash, bassist Mark O'Toole, and drummer Peter Gill. It's produced by the great Trevor Horn, and he transformed the track into the sleek dance anthem that we all recognize. Relax was not a huge hit in America. It was released in the UK on October 24th, 1983, but by the end of the year, it was running out of steam. It topped out at number 35. But then Relax received a boost after Frankie appeared on Top of the Pops on January 5th, 1984, which started their upward trend. Afterwards, Relax jumped to number 6. Then on January 11th, the song received another boost, courtesy of BBC Radio 1 DJ Mike Reed. He literally lifted the needle off the spinning record while broadcasting the song, and he just stopped playing it. He interrupted it. He realized what it was really about, and he announced on air that he was banning it on the spot due to its explicit lyrics, which, among other lyrics, included the lines, behind the scenes, the BBC was also planning to ban the single, and they did so soon afterward, but as you can imagine, this only made people want to listen to find out why it was banned, and record sales went up and radio play in some places. As a result, the record stores could not keep up with this demand. And then still, some UK radio stations put Relax in heavy rotation, bragging that they were playing the song that the BBC had effectively banned. That brought a lot of ears to it. Not surprisingly, by January 21st, just a few weeks later, Relax had climbed to number 2 on the UK charts and claimed number 1 just a week later. For 5 weeks, Frankie was on top of the world. The song's leather-clad music video, which wasn't exactly rated PG, also got banned, and Relax stuck around on the charts all the way through October, selling close to 2 million copies. Finally, the BBC reversed course and lifted the ban in December of '84, just in time for Frankie to perform Relax on the Christmas installment of Top of the Pops. And that sparked yet another run up the charts. So 3 times it went up. Here in America, we missed all this commotion. Relax was much less controversial. Initially released in the spring of '84, the song peaked at number 67 on the Hot 100. However, it fared better in early '85. It took us a while to catch up to the UK. It was re-released, climbed to number 10. Globally, Relax dominated the airwaves, reaching the top 10 virtually everywhere and going to number 1 in at least 10 different countries. Along with the release of Relax, Frankie Goes to Hollywood launched a brilliant marketing campaign, putting the Frankie Say, the slogans on t-shirts everywhere. Americans were wearing it. They had the swag. Did you own one? I had a couple. The Frankie Goes to Hollywood brand was a pop culture sensation, has had a number of cameos from The Wedding Singer to Friends.
If you don't mind, I'm going to take the rest of my stuff and relax.
Well, most Americans consider Frankie Goes to Hollywood a one-hit wonder, but in the UK, the band, they kicked out 5 straight top 5 hits, including a couple more number 1s, 2 Tribes and The Power of Love. They were amazing. Again, number 1 and number 2 songs at the same time. Unlike the 60s where, if you remember it, you weren't there. If you don't remember Relax, the t-shirt especially, you definitely were not in the 80s. All right, coming in at number 3, I've got Pearl Jam with Jeremy. Now, do you remember all the controversy surrounding this one going into the 90s here? This song, of course, comes from Pearl Jam's 1991 debut album, 10. It's a retelling of the tragic fate of Jeremy Waddell, a 15-year-old Texas high schooler who took his own life in January of 1991. So after arriving late for his second period English class, Jeremy was sent to the office to get an admittance slip, but he returned to class instead armed with a weapon. He took his life in front of his teacher and his classmates. The song poignantly sums up the horrific moment with the words, "Jeremy spoke in class today." This song struck a nerve with Gen X for sure. It became a cultural phenomenon. Its popularity was largely fueled by the award-winning music video. The video for Jeremy premiered on MTV in August of 1992, and its impact was immense. One critic described Jeremy as an after-school special from hell. Directed by Mark Pellington, Jeremy captivated viewers with its artistic flair and its gut-wrenching conclusion. Highlighted by Eddie Vedder's impassioned vocals, the video dramatizes the story of Jeremy, portrayed by teen actor Trevor Wilson. Harassed and bullied by classmates, ignored by his parents, Jeremy becomes increasingly isolated and volatile. His journey is represented via fast-moving, haunting imagery, and it's interspersed with close-up shots of Eddie Vedder telling the story, screaming the story, really. However, Jeremy's world is eerily frozen, with motionless classmates and emotionally absent parents. Set against these images, Jeremy acts out in frustration. He wanders alone in the forest and he draws childlike pictures. The video culminates as Jeremy enters a classroom, tosses his teacher an apple, and pulls out, I can't say it on YouTube. It's crazy. And doing the unthinkable with it. The video then cuts to a black background with white text reading 3:30 in the afternoon, an affluent suburb, 64 degrees and cloudy. The next shot then pans across his classmates, frozen in shock and with blood on them. Due to MTV's censorship guidelines, the weapon and the act itself was edited out. Though the edit did a lot more damage than the original footage. For example, this cut led to widespread misinterpretation of the video's conclusion. A lot of viewers believed instead that Jeremy, instead of taking his own life, that he'd done something far worse. And that confusion persisted for years. Actually, a few years later, the music video for Jeremy was blamed for an attack in Moses Lake, Washington, a school in '96. Prosecutors for the case pushed the narrative that the perpetrator was influenced by the edited version of the video. Mark Pellington, the director, expressed a lot of frustration over the misunderstanding. He explained that the video had been sorely misconstrued. Despite the misconceptions surrounding it, the music video for Jeremy actually went on to win 4 MTV Video Music Awards in '93, and the song turned Pearl Jam into a legitimate cultural phenomenon. I mean, before Jeremy, 10 had sold between 500,000 and 1 million copies, pretty good, but it had taken the better part of the year to get to that. After Jeremy, 10 immediately sold 2 million copies, then 4 million and 5 million, on its way to roughly 16 million albums sold. Jeremy's popularity also changed Pearl Jam's perspective on making music videos, wanting their audience to connect with the music and not the visual medium. The band actually didn't release another video until the animated Do the Evolution in '98. A lot of time passed. Many of you know Pearl Jam released their 12th studio album, Dark Matter, in April of 2024, and the band is scheduled to resume touring next year. All right, so for today's number 2 taboo track, I got Bloodrock with one of the most blood-curdling songs of the entire rock era. We've covered it before, but we're covering it again, DOA. Hailing from Fort Worth, Texas, Bloodrock was a heavy metal outfit. DOA, of course, Dead on Arrival is what it stands for, and the song came from Bloodrock's breakthrough LP, Bloodrock 2, in 1971. This chilling piece was inspired by a traumatic event that was witnessed by guitarist Lee Pickens as a teenager. Lee, who had aspirations of becoming a pilot, had just exited a plane that his friend was operating, actually, and he was standing near the runway. And then he watched in horror as the plane took off again, and after climbing 200 feet in the air, it suddenly plummeted to the ground. It crashed in a fiery wreck, and Lee's friend was killed in that crash, and Lee would have been too if he would have been in there. This episode permanently haunted the guitarist. How could it not? Lee later shared the story with his bandmates, and they convinced him to write a song inspired by the incident, resulting in DOA.
Laying here, looking at the ceiling.
The nightmarish tale recounts of the aftermath of a plane crash with a dying man describing the grim scene. In the second stanza of the first verse, a male victim on the verge of death looks over at his female companion, and he finds her unresponsive.
I knew how such a distant stare.
Then in the next verse, the narrator looks at an EMT who's there to save his life. He sees that his face is pale, and as he bends down, the attendant whispers to the man that there's no chance he's going to live.
There's no chance for me.
Then in the final verse, with the life draining out of his body, the narrator begs God to put him out of his misery. This one is not a song for the squeamish.
Teach me how to die.
DOA was easily the most disturbing song to hit the charts in the 70s. I don't think you can argue another one. Let me know in the comments. It shocked and fascinated radio listeners all over. Really, it took a lot of courage for radio stations to even play DOA, especially since allegedly the FCC tried to outlaw it. The song was extremely controversial. Its graphic depiction of death and injury pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable for radio play in the early 70s, and a lot of American top 40 radio stations outright banned the song. They would not play it no matter how many times people requested it. It's like the VHS series Faces of Death if it had a soundtrack. But aside from DOA's graphic storytelling and its really creepy vibe, there were other problems with the song as well. Now, the sirens on the recording, they sounded so real that drivers who heard the song on the radio would actually pull over to the side of the road. They believed an ambulance was approaching. It psyched them out. I mean, can you imagine driving late at night listening to DOA and then the sirens come on? Really freaky. And then there was a misinterpretation of the lyrics. Actually, some listeners claimed that DOA was about a couple driving under the influence of LSD, and in a hallucinogenic stupor, they lose control of the vehicle and crash, and it was the chorus that sparked conjecture about DOA being a song about drugs, where it says, I remember we were flying along and hit something in the air.
And hit something in the air.
However, shortly after the height of DOA's success, perhaps to diffuse the controversy, the members of Bloodrock joined Grand Funk Railroad and other bands in an anti-drug radio campaign. Now, all that being said, whatever radio stations did play the song, it would light up the phone lines like a Christmas tree. I mean, crazy. Top 40 DJs of the early 70s marveled at the listener response every time they played the song just once. For any station that did play it, right? Bloodrock's DOA was the most requested song of its time. Miraculously, the single did crack the Hot 100. It went to number 36, and it became Bloodrock's only top 40 hit. If it hadn't have been banned, it definitely would have hit number 1. All right, speaking of number 1, here we are. We've reached the number 1 taboo track of the countdown. And for this one, I'm going with an 80s blockbuster song that helped define the decade. From their 1985 album, Brothers in Arms, it's Dire Straits with Money for Nothing. And I think if you know this song, you know what I'm talking about. Another case of art versus censorship. Money for Nothing was written by guitar legend Mark Knopfler in an appliance store. Or at least that's where it got started. So get this. While the front man was shopping, he overheard a couple of workers who were watching MTV on a multi-television display. Lots of TVs there. And these two guys were complaining about rock stars who had the easy life, and Mark Knopfler didn't think there was any substance to this rant. But he was kind of intrigued by it, kind of listening, and he wanted to capture what they were saying word for word. So he found some paper, and he transcribed the exchange verbatim, his words. Now, this conversation included the now iconic lines, money for nothing and chicks for free.
Money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now that ain't working.
And that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Everybody knows these lyrics. The conversation was also, as attested by the song's lyrics, pretty savage. It included repeated homophobic slurs aimed at whatever musicians were on the screen performing. Although we don't know who it is for sure, Knopfler transcribed verbatim what they said, and he did leave us a couple of clues. Now, we know it's a band because he refers to them as yo-yos and them guys. And then zeroing in on one of them, we learn that he has an earring, he has makeup, and really unusual hair, and later someone is playing the bongos. There's not a lot to go on there, but you know what? Let me know in the comments what song or video you think it was. It was probably 82, 83. If you know a music video that fits that criteria. Money for Nothing became the biggest hit of Dire Straits' career. But despite the song's mega success, it drew heavy fire from critics over Knopfler's repeated use of that slur. Some publications attacked the frontman for using the other F word in the unedited version of the song. Now, for example, Mark said he received an objection from the editor of a gay newspaper in London who said the lyric was really below the belt. However, Mark Knopfler defended his use of the word on artistic and journalistic grounds. He said he didn't want to censor the attested dialogue, no matter how crude it was, because he wanted to show what they really said. To go deeper on Knopfler's staunch integrity, it's important to know that before he was a rock star, he actually was educated as a journalist. In an interview with Unkept magazine, Knopfler said that his journalistic experience fed into Money for Nothing for sure. He said, and I quote, "I was reporting verbatim what that particular guy thought of musicians. I transcribed his words there and then. He was a meathead. To him, being a rock star was easy." So to be fair, the use of the term was both a journalistic and artistic decision. But even so, to keep Money for Nothing palatable for radio airplay, Warner Brothers manufactured an edited version of the song, removing the controversial lyrics that's played to this day. Later in 2011, Money for Nothing faced renewed scrutiny when the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, the CBSC, they ruled that the unedited version of the song was unacceptable for airplay on private Canadian radio stations due to the offensive term. This decision led to debates and protests from some radio stations, and ultimately the decision was reversed. And the choice to run the unedited version was returned to the individual stations. So what do you think about Money for Nothing for this controversy? Was it justified or just blown out of proportion? What do you think about the songs on this countdown? What do you think are the 5 most controversial taboo songs of all time? Songs that you just cannot sing now. We could actually do more. There's Young Girl from the 60s, and gosh, I can think of a few more. But let us know your memories of these songs. What are your choices? What do you think about the banning or about what people think of them? And let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We would love to have you as part of our community. Hope everybody had a great holiday. Until next time, 3 chords. and the truth, my friends.